Okay, is Abhimanyu Yadav here? Abhimanyu Yadav, has he joined? Does anyone know him? Abhimanyu Yadav? Oh, looks like he has not made any friends so far. Okay, apparently this person, Abhimanyu Yadav, is a soil dynamics student and he has been sick all this while and he missed all lectures before this. So in case you meet him, come across him in any other class, please instruct him or help him with registration at Moodle platform, because otherwise he will not be able to access any study material. Although I wrote to him in email, but nevertheless. Okay, so we continue with the new topic that's the core of this course. What do we mean by seismic design philosophy? So what do you understand by philosophy anyway? Does philosophy mean anything to you? You must have heard this term before. So, what do you mean by philosophy? No idea? Oh my God, never had this much silence in the class.
These are the fundamental principles by which we will design.
Fundamental principles is fine. When we talk about philosophy or design philosophy, they actually refer to a set of reasons for the actions that we take. Right? Why are we doing this? So there has to be a reason for doing this, for anything. So if we go about, structural design, if you look at it, how the structural design has evolved, it has evolved from empirical basis earlier times, when the theory about structural mechanics and behavior was not so well developed. People experimented with what worked and what did not work, and then adopted certain common guidelines for construction. And then eventually, as things progressed, as the knowledge started accumulating, then some kind of theories of strength came into existence, and everything or whatever was the empirical practice, construction practice, that was adapted within the framework of whatever knowledge basis that we developed over a period of time concerning the strength of the structure or behavior of the structures under load, structural elements under load. Now, and then we try to come up with some kind of justification why some things, some practices worked and why some practices did not work so satisfactorily, on the basis of these newfound theories or hypothesis, as we may as they are, and try to reason out, provide a reason framework, logical framework for our design actions or for our construction actions, why this thing has to be done in this particular way. So so then we come to every design action that we do. I mean, if you look at your basic structural design, that also has some kind of rationale, some kind of basis for your calculations. The section capacities are decided based on some logical framework. For example, when you talk of limit state design, you design for the limit state of collapse, ultimate limit state, right? But I mean, when you talk of ultimate limit state, that's the failure, and there is a lot of ground to be covered between linear elastic behavior and the ultimate behavior. But still, all your calculations, you never bother about your nonlinear analysis. Your calculations are still based on linear analysis. So everything has been calibrated, that stress block, Whitney stress block, and the coefficients, everything has been calibrated in such a way that even if you perform a linear analysis, your results would be consistent with what is going to be at the ultimate strain, ultimate strength, ultimate level. So the idea is always to facilitate simplicity in analysis, simplicity in implementation, and yet reconcile it with the ultimate, reconcile it with the strength and capacity and demand principle that we have for any design. So in that context, if you look at it in the philosophical fashion, so every design has to have certain set of logical basis, logical framework to operate, and so does the seismic design procedure. So we do have a set of logical framework rules within which we need to operate, so that we can we come up with a durable and safe design. So what is it that we specially require to consider when dealing with earthquake load or when dealing with seismic design? So one thing that you need to look at, I will again go back to my basic equation of structural dynamics, dynamic behavior. Now this force, damping force, is generally very small compared to the magnitude of elastic force or the spring force and the inertia term, right? So this is generally damping levels so I may designate them as spring force, damping force, and let's say inertia term, right? So FD is generally very small compared to Fs and
Sir, your screen is not visible.
oh, why is that? let me present again. So is it fine now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you are able to see the worksheet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, fine. So this damping term is usually very small compared to this elastic force, the spring force, and the inertia term that we have. So let me just draw the basic diagram, representative diagram. So this is mass, this is stiffness, and we can have damper somewhere here. So some damping mechanism, and we are talking about lateral displacement of the mass with respect to base, and this is excited by UG double dot. Right, so U the relative displacement of mass m with respect to ground or base. Okay, so idea is this damping force is generally very small unless you provide for some artificial, some damping devices explicitly to absorb an energy dissipation, to absorb energy of vibration. So damping due to natural sources, natural behavior, inherent behavior of the structural material during vibration is going to be very small compared to these two. So then what is important is I will write this equation again. I will ignore damping term for the ease of discussion, right? Because one more term will unnecessarily complicate or divert, distract our attention. So essentially what we are dealing here is the statement of equilibrium. There is a spring force that the column exerts. So this will behave, this will tend to move like this, and there will be a force which is K times U, and this force has to be balanced by the rate of change of momentum of this mass, right? And that is what you have here. Rate of change of momentum considering the mass is zero. Mass is constant, does not change with time. Now what we need to look at here, this is actually traditional your mass times acceleration. So this is like a force, this is of course a force. Now where does this force act? Spring force. So I will call this as Fi. So let me just say Fi1 and this is Fi2. This is of course Fs. Fs acts through which point? I mean, if there is a force, it has to act through some point, isn't it? It has to have a point of action. So obviously direction is same. Direction is it will act, I mean spring force, force in the spring will be opposite, will tend to oppose the deformation. So that direction is known, but where does it act? Where does the spring force act? Any guesses?
So that point where spring is attached.
Okay, so that is, you are talking about one spring case when you have this idealize it like this. So this is mass and this is stiffness. So this will act through the axis of the spring, right? But when you talk about
Yes, sir, yes.
But when you talk about the building system or any structural system, there are structural elements which are distributed, right? And all of them have elastic stiffness. They will all resist the motion. So they will all contribute. So what the spring, single spring that you see here, it is actually a representative of, resultant of these two springs. This is one column and this is another column. If I take out, isolate the portal in 2D. Right? So where does this act? So point I am trying to make here is, it is not one spring. I have actually two springs of, let's say, k by 2, which are supporting this mass, right? And of course both the springs are in parallel because they are both stretched or compressed by the same amount. So I can always replace it by an equivalent spring of stiffness K, right? So the procedure, the problem reduces to the single mass, single spring system. But actual system is going to be like these two springs. So effectively, where would this equivalent spring be placed? Where should the equivalent spring be placed? If I combine these parallel, combination of parallel springs and combine them as an equivalent single spring, so where should I place this spring, equivalent spring? Center part is right, but here we are talking about center of stiffness, right? Where the equivalent forces, this is Ku by 2, this is Ku by 2, then figure out wherever the center of these forces lies, and that will be the point where this Ku will act, right? So this is what we call as center of stiffness. Now come to the second term. Where does this act? Inertia term. This will act through centroid, right? Center of gravity or center of mass. So that is right. So acts through now tell me, are these both, I mean centers, they are points, right? So are these points coincident?
may not be sir.
Okay, very good. So under what conditions will they be coincident? For symmetric structures, if CS, I would call it CS and I would call this CM. CS and CM coincide for okay, there is no point in writing perfectly symmetric. Symmetric is symmetric. For symmetric systems. Now what happens if they are not symmetric? So let me draw the hypothetical situation. It's not hypothetical, most of the time it is like that. For unsymmetric systems. So let me just look at the plan. Right, so you have one column here, one column here, one column here, and one column here. Right? Now assume that these columns are of different dimensions, so that it is not symmetric. Right? So this is column stiffness K1, K2, K3, K4 and so on. The slab is of course symmetric. So this is centroid, so this is what we call as center of mass, and let us say this side column are little more stiff compared to columns on this side, flexible side. So this is what we call as flexible side, and this is what we call as stiff side. Right? So let's say KF, KS, and obviously KS is greater than KF. So you end up with center of stiffness shifting towards the stiffer side. Now before we go into this, now if this is the direction of motion u, then this acts like Fs will act through center of stiffness, right? and it has to be equal to the inertia force that we have here, that will act through center of mass. Right? So this is Fi. Now this is what we call as eccentricity. Now there can be eccentricity in x direction, there can be eccentricity in y direction. So if this is x, this is y, so this is Ex and this is Ey. And there can be, this is u is of course the displacement along x direction, and there is a moment, there is eccentricity between the inertia, the point through which inertia force acts and the point through which spring force acts, or the column restoring forces act. And then because of the eccentricity, there will be an moment, additional torsion. Now what will be the effect of this torsion? How does torsion affect the system? Yes, so it will add additional shear stress to the columns depending on what is the distance, this lever arm, right? So it will project itself, so that this torsion has to be balanced by the additional shear force in the columns. Now this is coming entirely because of this additional force that the columns have to withstand. I mean, this is coming from nowhere apparently. This is entirely because of the configuration of the structure. Had I taken pain during the planning of the structure to ensure that this eccentricity is minimized, or tried to ensure that this spring force is coincident with the inertia term, then there wouldn't be this torsion, additional torsion. And then the forces that I need to design my columns for would be, these additional forces would be eliminated automatically. Right? Are you getting my point? So this torsion effect additional shear forces in columns are caused by the twist on account of eccentricity. Between CS and center of stiffness and center of mass. Right? So if I had taken pain during the, or care during the planning of the facility, such that this stiffness or this shifting or the eccentricity is minimized, then these additional forces wouldn't have, I wouldn't have to bother about these additional forces in the design to withstand earthquakes. Now this is something very unique because this force is not coming because of the any external loading or anything. This is entirely because of the configuration. generated by structural configuration. Now it is often, most of the time it is impossible to get a perfectly symmetric system. Eccentricity will be zero only for a perfectly symmetric system. Most of the time it is impossible. For example, if I have to add a staircase, it's for normal house, a normal building, you would only provide staircase at one side, right? And that staircase, if it is integrated with the structural skeleton of the system, then that is going to make this system, this particular side, very, very stiff, because that staircase will add significantly. It acts like a diagonal bracing, and it will make the system very, very stiff, this side. So this is something that you cannot avoid. It's a functional requirement if you look at it. So how do you access upper floors if there is no staircase to be used? And I mean, just because you want to make the building very, very symmetric, so either you place the staircase right in the middle, I mean, just make it a spiral staircase around the centroid. Now that is going to be very, very difficult. It will obstruct, hamper the functional or the operational requirements of the building to which it is to be put to use. And then spiral staircase is not really a very convenient thing. You cannot build a very large spiral, and it's not easy climbing up or down a spiral staircase. So any other staircase will necessarily alter the stiffness configuration in individual floor. So sometimes you will even have the eccentricities actually shifting. In one floor it is eccentric to this side, on another floor it might be, eccentricity might be shifted to this side. So that is making matters even worse. So bottom floor is twisting in one side, upper floor is twisting on the other side, and that is causing further distress to the system. So in general, this kind of eccentricity cannot be avoided. So one has to be aware of these kind of problems that may crop up. Now this is something that will not be, you will not appreciate it if you just design it for a gravity load system. This is peculiar, this problem is peculiar, which manifests itself only when you look at planes, loads coming in horizontal plane. The lateral loads have to be withstood by these vertical load carrying elements, right? So this is entirely generated by the structural configuration, and we can only do our own part, whatever we can do to control its extent. Try to minimize it as far as possible wherever you can. And if you are aware of this possibility, then it is very much feasible to reduce this kind of unnecessary additional forces in design. Because it's not that we cannot design, if we can account for this, we can always design for these additional forces, but that is unnecessarily going to increase the cost of construction. Just a minute. Yes. Okay. किस चीज का
प्रोजेक्ट भी देता हूँ एंटी कॉमिशन तो उन्होंने आपके पास भेजा था साइन करने के लिए। तो शायद आपने कहा कि वो फिल नहीं था तो आपने अपने पास रख लिया था, तो उन्होंने मुझे बोला आपसे।
कौन से प्रोजेक्ट कर रहे हैं?
सर आईडीएच प्रोजेक्ट इलेक्ट्रिकल डिपार्टमेंट से।
Is it on my desk?
आपने उसे भेजा है।
I'll find out. नहीं, I'll talk to office after the class.
And I can read also.
नहीं, क्या करना है, वो अब चला जाएगा, पार्टी के पास चला जाएगा वापस.
नहीं सर, वो एक्चुअली मुझे आपसे पूछना था उसमें फिल कैसे करना है.
Okay. In that case, can you please get the document and come here?
सर डॉक्यूमेंट में एक जगह ऑलरेडी.
Oh,
सर आई कैन
Are
वेट
you-
इफ यू आर
are you talking about this?
Yes, sir.
Tata Power?
Yes, sir.
इसमें तो कहीं कुछ
सर वो मुझे
आता पता ही नहीं है.
हाँ आई नो सर, बट मुझे ये सब पूछना था.
ठीक है,
क्लास
सर.
में
After 11 we will discuss.
I will-
ठीक है. Okay. Sorry about that. So this is one important factor that needs to be considered for our design for earthquake loading, that which is not a point of consideration at all when you look at design for vertical loads, right? Or the gravity loads. Wind, again, this will probably not going to be of much of a concern, because wind is of course doesn't generate too much of inertia effect. It's only the lateral force, and forces are to be transferred by the vertical load carrying member. So that's the only thing. But inertia component is not going to be very strong in case of wind induced vibrations. Primarily because wind oscillations are generally very, very low frequency oscillations, and for low frequency oscillations accelerations are not very high, right? And that's why the inertia term, which is proportional to acceleration, is not going to be as significant as it is in the case of earthquake motions, earthquake induced vibrations. So this torsion effect is generally a matter of grave concern for earthquake resistant design, and if we can avoid this effect, or if we can minimize these effects, then design, we can actually come up with a very, very economical design. And otherwise we will have to spend unnecessarily in a stronger building than it is warranted. And just providing stronger building isn't really solving the problem, because in order to add strength I need to add material to that, isn't it? Strength doesn't come out of thin air. So I need to add more material to that, and when I add more material to that, I'm adding more mass into the system, and that will add another additional inertia force coming into the system, right? So it's very soon you will hit the law of diminishing return, and it may very soon turn out to be a problem in futility, exercise in futility. You cannot really get into this arm wrestling with earthquake forces. So again, the easiest solution is to keep this possibility at in your consideration when you are planning the facility, and that is why I always insist that structural engineers should always work on a project with architects right from the conceptual stage, right when the right at the time of conceiving the facility architectural plan. Otherwise it is going to be very, very difficult to come up with a economical structural solution to the problem, because most of the features that you will come up with, that an architect will come up with, is going to add to the eccentricity, and that is going to create problem later on. So we have this eccentric system, Now the other problem is, which earthquake do you design? Design earthquake, and more importantly, rather earthquake design criteria. How do you design to resist earthquakes? So what is a design earthquake? Any ideas?
Sir, for which earthquake we are going to design our system?
Pardon?
The earthquake for which we are designing our structure,
Okay,
like for future.
so how do you decide? As I said, earthquakes come in all shapes and sizes. So how do you characterize design earthquake for which you need to design? I mean, as a structural engineer, you are supposed to take a call. Which what should be the parameters for earthquake resistant design for the system?
Sir, you told about Newmark Hall means tripartite plot. In that tripartite plot, we use several amplification factors. Means, for example, if we are building on alluvium soil, we will see the proper graph according to alluvium soil and apply the alpha V alpha A in whichever range we are designing it, and that will give us the design earthquake.
Yes, so essentially you come up with what is called as a design spectrum. There are different ways of defining design spectrum. So one is of course Newmark Hall. That's the standard method of many design codes. Another one is uniform hazard spectrum, where we make use of probabilistic assessment for the same and come up with a design spectrum for the same frequency of occurrence, exceedance, right? So that's how you come up with these 475 return period earthquake and 2475 period return year return period earthquake and so on, right? All those are based on some probability models. You can derive the basis. I mean, you can come up with those numbers when you go into the probability models and so on. So the idea is you define the design spectrum for which site you are considering. It will be site dependent or zone dependent wherever your site location is, and according to that site you pick up whatever is the design spectrum that will characterize the earthquake ground motion which needs to be considered for design. Now even for that design level earthquake that you consider, let's say if I am considering uniform hazard spectrum, the Uniform Building Code or even Eurocode, they talk about a return period that is to be considered is 475 year return period earthquake. Now of course there is nothing sacrosanct about these numbers. 475, you can as well take it 300, you may as well take it 500, as long as you justify your decision. But as it is, we try to be risk averse in everything we do. So somebody specified 475 is a reasonable number and we continue with that number just because it is convenient to do so. I don't see any reason why you can't have anything different, but the problem is why would you try to invite trouble and spend energy defending a new number when the outcome is not going to be very different either way. So you stick with, continue with whatever is the practice which is widely accepted by the profession, rightly or wrongly, doesn't really matter. As you will see, it is not going to cause much of difference anyway. Now the problem is, even if I design, I can estimate, we will come to that, how do we account for these in our design calculation and find out the forces due to earthquake, and then how do we combine it, the earthquake forces with our design level other gravity load forces, and come up with our design quantities. So if I use this spectrum which is defined as the design spectrum, I cannot really design any system which will behave elastically for even for this earthquake. It is too huge. The forces are going to be way too high. So actually what I do is, I will actually design for elastic behavior only for about 15 to 25% of earthquake force. So whatever forces I estimate using this design spectrum that is specified for the site, the elastic behavior is ensured only for about 15 to 25% of that force. So when I admit that the structure is not going to be elastic for the entire earthquake force, then obviously the natural corollary is that I need structure will sustain damage during what I call as design earthquake. Now that is fundamentally different from your concept of structural design. So far you have never come across a situation where you say that you are designing to withstand certain loads, and on the same side, without flinching your eyelid, without battling your eyelid, you also say that structure will sustain damage during design earthquake for the earthquake for which I am designing the system. Right? So take a moment or whole day to ponder over this very, very important statement. That is the basis of earthquake resistant design. Structure will sustain damage during design earthquake. Even for the earthquake for which I am designing the structure will not remain elastic or undamaged. There will be some damage. There will be some damage in the structure. Structure will sustain some damage. What the implications are, we will discuss in our next class.